Our trust is being lost, honestly. Have you ever heard the term trust is earned in drops and lost in buckets? Well, as a parent, my trust for the school systems are being lost.
That's the voice of Rhonda Williams, a courageous mom who joined her voice with 200 others speaking up for respect for parents, especially when it comes to how transgender issues are handled at school. Virginia Beach parents recently filed a lawsuit on this issue against their school board and won a key victory. Will other schools pay attention? We'll update you on this and more. Welcome to Speak Up Virginia, equipping you to speak up on the life, family, and freedom issues that matter most to you. From the Family Foundation, I'm your host, Candi Cushman, with our president, Victoria Cobb. Well, welcome everybody. Thanks for joining us again for Speak Up Virginia. You know, Victoria, things have just been so heavy lately. I thought maybe it was time to have a little bit of lighthearted chit-chat on something else. So I wanted to just talk about what I've been noticing in my neighborhood, and that's that we have all the extravagant Halloween decorations coming out. Now, I will say, I don't understand some of them. Some of them, are cute and fallish and funny, but one of our neighbors has these huge zombie babies. And I don't know what's up with the zombie babies, but I just don't see the necessity for the zombie babies or why that is a fun thing to do. Then what's up with these huge skeletons? I mean, they've got to be 10 or 20 feet. Everyone's putting them out.
I just don't understand how Halloween decorating has become like Christmas decorating. It never used to be to this degree. It's become a whole industry. I'm sure they're making tons of money with all these decorations, but I have to tell you, I'm kind of a Halloween Scrooge. If there was like a Scrooge for the Halloween season, if that was a thing, I just am not into it. I find them all kind of ugly and tacky. I love fall. I have my pumpkins. But all this stuff, I hate it all, to be honest with you. And maybe that's terrible. And I do, I could get haters or whatever, but I don't know. It's all dark, and it's like, I'm not even a black cat fan. I don't know. I know I'm really going to get haters.
Why not? Black cats are so cute.
I don't know. They cross, that whole, I don't know.
I've got a neighbor with 5 black cat shadows, and I actually freaked out a little bit. There's animals in his yard.
Oh, but they're like fake?
But they were fake.
Yeah.
But seriously, Jesse, do you know what?
I don't like spiders.
But what's the deal with the gigantic skeletons? And then they leave those skeletons up year round. Like they'll have a 20-foot gigantic skeleton.
Okay, I have not seen that in my neighborhood.
It's like a thing in my neighborhood.
Oh, good.
Okay,
I'm hoping it doesn't come to mine.
I don't know what the deal is with that, but I live in Hanover County, and on the way to get to the highway, on my way to work, there is a giant 20-foot skeleton that is there all year round.
Does it hang from a tree or it's a blow up?
It's like tied to a light pole or something. It's huge. I
have skeletons that are eating at a picnic table
like
in my dining
size.
room, but they're not that big.
It's like prehistoric dinosaur size, except it's a human skeleton.
Which humans have never been that big. It doesn't make any sense. I'm sorry. I'm just not into it. I'm not into any of it.
Well, I did see some interesting stories on Halloween decorations gone awry, and I thought that would be fun to look at. One from this year is there's a family in New York that decided to replicate that their house was burning. They have flames in the windows. And apparently this freaked people out. People started calling 911 because it was just a little bit too realistic.
I can't even imagine doing something like that, first of all, to make your house look like it's on fire. And I guess it was through the windows. And so you can't really, I can see how, looking at it, I could see how it would be confusing.
It actually, for the first few seconds, we're going to put a little clip of it on there, but it looks pretty realistic.
Those holes that not deterred me for this.
Doesn't it look great?
Yeah.
I feel bad for the fire company.
That's
terrible.
The ones we should feel sorry for. But there's another one that I remembered from Texas a few years back, and I found it because I remember this happening, where they tried to replicate the scene from one of the Christmas Vacation movies where the guy's, Chevy Chase is putting the lights on and he falls and he's hanging on the gutter.
Yeah.
So they have a guy dressed just like him hanging from the gutter and a ladder that looks like it's fallen. Well, this passerby just freaked out about that, so we're just going to play a little clip of that.
Oh, mister, please hold on.
The Heerline family of Austin, Texas put up a display that's a true slice of Americana. They used a dummy on the edge of the roof and a ladder meant to look like it's tipping over, just like this scene from the movie National Lampoon's Christmas Vacation, as Clark Griswold attempts to hang Christmas lights. But Alfred Norwood Jr., a veteran who just happened to be passing by, thought it was a real person in distress. His panic captured on the family's front porch camera. He tried to move the ladder to help the man, not knowing it was a mannequin.
Can you reach it?
Waving people down in traffic while on the phone with 911.
So I turned around and started calling for help, and nobody wanted to stop.
We took it to a whole nother level.
You're welcome over for hot cocoa any day of the week.
Okay, you have to feel bad for this guy that like sees it and thinks there's an emergency and he's trying to solve it. And I mean, why? I don't know why our decorations have to get to this level. I just put up a few lights. I mean, this is obviously Christmas. We were talking about Halloween earlier, Halloween decorations, but like, I don't get it.
They said they were trying to win the neighborhood Halloween decorating contest.
That's fair. I forgot about that. It was a contest involved. I am competitive, so maybe there needs to be a contest to get me a little more motivated on my decorating. Yeah. But can we try to avoid the things that like draw in the fire company or cause someone to go running for help? Yeah, and like you were saying, why can't we just keep Christmas as the predominant decorating season? I don't know. I hate to get to a serious note, but it kind of seems like something about our culture when Halloween is. I think Halloween there might be more decorations in our neighborhood. I honestly am thinking it's starting to outwin Christmas decorations, which is a shame. And Richmond has, been known as a city with the tacky lights tour and all that stuff. And like,
please,
I'm sorry, I know that's sensitive issue. That's Candy's neighborhood. No, I'm just one. There's so many neighborhoods that have too many
tacky lights 2 times a year.
Maybe we could do a Halloween contest in your neighborhood so it can just get even crazier. My neighborhood's reasonably tame on both fronts, but I don't understand the Halloween thing. I just don't get into it.
Victoria, maybe you should decorate for the other holiday on October 31st, which is Reformation Day.
Yes, what would I've actually, we had an intern one time that brought in a Reformation Day cake, but I'm not sure what else goes with that kind of
95 Theses. Go nail them to a door.
Yeah, because everyone's going to know what that is.
I will say I try not to be a Scrooge to my family, so they enjoy the dressing up part of it, and we don't allow any dark costumes, so there's no ghosts and goblins, and we don't allow any of that stuff. But I try to like go along with it, although I still sit there and go, we're spending money on what?
We give candy out.
Yeah, of course we do too. I don't want to be a Scrooge to the rest of the neighborhood. I just happen to not really enjoy it.
You're using a Christmas term for Halloween.
I know, because I don't know what it is. What would be an anti-Halloween person? Actually, they'd be a person of light and happiness. That's my take. Okay, we should move on because...
We should. This is going downhill. All right, well, getting into more serious topics, I did want to update people on some good news, and that is these courageous parents out there on the front lines in this battle to restore their parental rights when it comes to how transgender issues are being navigated in their schools. We have got these bold parents stepping up, speaking up, and it's really refreshing to see. Now, I just want to start out today with a clip that will encourage you, this very brave mom, Rhonda Williams, speaking at a press conference, a Protect Every Kid rally that we did in Newport News.
Our trust is being lost, honestly. Have you ever heard the term trust is earned in drops and lost in buckets? Well, as a parent, my trust for the school systems are being lost in buckets, unfortunately. We trust you to listen to our voices. We trust you to listen and hear our concerns regarding our children and respond accordingly. We trust you to keep the door of communications open, honest communication. And we don't send our children to school one way for them to identify another way once they're there. We trust you to keep us involved and keep us as the authority in our children's lives. And I do recall, as has been said before, we as the church and the community, we've been in the same exact position before. A couple years ago, where Northam administration put in policies that we didn't agree with as parents and the community. But it was said that it was law and it had to be adopted. We trusted you and believed that you had made the right decision when you decided to reject these policies. But soon we were let down when you were pressured to accept these bad policies. So I have a question. Is the new policy not law? Does it not have to be adopted?
All right, well, Rhonda was one of 200 parents and concerned citizens that came out for this rally in Newport News. But before we talk about that rally itself, Victoria, I just wanted you to respond to the question that Rhonda was asking, because she says, you know, why are school boards ignoring these parents? They're either flat out rejecting the Youngkin revisions that restore parental rights to these issues, or they seem to be slow walking it, just continuously putting off a vote. Why is this happening? And as Rhonda asked, do they have to comply?
Yeah, so I think we should start with the sort of overarching policy issue, which is both the governor has passed these policies, right, and said that you need to comply, and the Attorney General, Jason Miyares, has come in behind him and given legal documentation saying that school boards need to come in alignment because, again, these guidelines, unlike the past ones, are consistent with our code saying that parents have the right to direct the outcome of their kid, right? So they've now passed guidelines that line up with our law, and they're saying, look, yes, your policy should change, and I think they've made it clear that schools cannot purposely deceive parents, hide information from parents. So, it is frustrating, and these parents are just saying, like, if you've got the folks at the top saying this, and we're the parents of the school system telling you to get in line, why is it so hard? I would say this. I do think that there has been such an aggressive response in the past by LGBT organizations that you have to cater to what they want, that I think school boards still have some lingering fear around passing a policy that actually protects every kid, not just this small group of folks. And so what's crazy is I think all they need to do is look at, first of all, what happened in Loudoun County and realize it's a dangerous policy. But second of all, look at the lawsuit that happened in Virginia Beach. So I think we should talk a little bit about that, because that should be enough to get a school board to say, I don't want to go through a lawsuit.
Yeah, and my understanding is what the Attorney General has said is the schools can't be in open conflict with the Youngkin revisions.
Right.
That's where kind of the rubber hits the road, where they need to comply. And so the way that is going to be enforced is with parents taking a stand and pointing those conflicts out. And that's what happened in Virginia Beach. And so this is huge news if you haven't heard about it yet or you didn't get our email alert, because these two moms actually scored a pretty big victory for all parents in the Commonwealth. And so there were two moms that filed a lawsuit against their school board in Virginia Beach because at that time they were refusing to comply with the Youngkin policies. And let me just give you some details about the information, because I looked at that lawsuit and it was interesting what the moms were saying was happening. So one of the moms had elementary age daughters that had attended a summer school camp where they were subjected to these conversations from camp leaders, you know, or in charge of the student groups and things like that. And the little girls were hearing conversations from these leaders about gender identity and transgender pronouns. I think there was a binary leader maybe at the camp that was, you know, and so these leaders were kind of instigating conversations around that. And so then the girls come home and ask their parents about what all this means. And again, this is elementary age. The parents are having this introduced, you know, outside of their scope without notice. And then, but it doesn't stop there. The girls go to their school, elementary school, and they're getting all this pressure from their friends to comply with this whole transgender pronoun agenda that's happening here. And these are elementary school kids coming under this pressure to change the way they think, the way they're speaking. Okay, the other mom in the lawsuit had a middle school age son, and he was told that he could be suspended for not complying with the transgender pronoun policy. Again, that's pretty young to having compelled speech forced on you from the powers that be. So this family expressed how they wanted their son to be able to stay in the middle school because he has friends there, but there was so much pressure coming at these families, marginalizing them, making them feel stigmatized for their beliefs, that they were feeling like they might have to put him in a different environment. And so that's why I think they filed the lawsuit. And it just showed you the overall environment. I don't think we understand what it's like day to day. For those of us not experiencing this, the environment for these families of faith, families that just want to teach their kids a sexual ethic at home, what that's like for their kids to be day in and day out in an environment that pressures them the complete opposite way.
Well, and remember, all of these policies came into place because we were told, school boards were told, government officials were told that these children who struggle with their gender are being stigmatized. That was what they used to get the original kind of policies that were kind of sneaking into different districts, and then ultimately to get the law that ended up with the original bad guidelines. It was these kids are being stigmatized. Well, now we have kids on the other side being stigmatized. And when are the adults going to step up and care about these kids that are being compelled to speak, confused about what they're seeing and dealing with, and having to handle it at an elementary school age? So no wonder they thought their parental rights are being trampled. These parents are saying, look, we can't handle this within our home. You're making us have to kind of protect our kids, and we can't even do that in the school system. And I mean, it's why the conclusion of their lawsuit, if you read their lawsuit, the conclusion was that the school district's refusal to comply with the Youngkin parental rights provisions was actually aggravating the climate, was making it worse, and even jeopardizing both their parental authority and the students' own constitutional freedoms, right? That compelled speech component. But I would say this, the good news is...
It's really good news.
It's really good news. So after this lawsuit was filed, a few days later, the school board finally adopted the right kinds of policy, a strong policy that puts most of the key Youngkin provisions in place.
It's amazing how after all this delay, all of a sudden action happened really
quick.
quick.
It's funny how that happens when you get a lawsuit threatening you.
But these parents really did a favor to all the other parents around the Commonwealth, because now this victory, we've had a school board respond, and now the question is, will school boards follow suit? I'm just going to kind of back up here and remind listeners what these revisions are, what's really at stake here. So I'm sure you've heard us talk about this a lot. You will recall that under former Governor Northam, there were these policies pushed through under his administration, forced on all school districts across the Commonwealth, that included language. It had high pressure on school districts to comply with language, basically cutting parents out of the process. There was actual language in these policies that instructed educators how to hide things from parents or even deceive parents if their children were experimenting with gender identity at school. So that is a significant issue to being able to be involved in your children's life, a bad precedent set for parents being able to exercise their constitutional responsibility to guide their children in these life matters. But then, of course, parents reacted against that in a big way all across the state, and Youngkin was swept into office on this Parents Matter campaign. And so now his education department has responded to that message from parents. They have cleaned up these bad policies, revised them. So now that language instructing educators on how to hide things from parents has been taken completely out.
Yeah, and I think we can't forget that his another key provision of these guidelines was also that it made it clear that a school cannot constitutionally compel either the employees, which are the teachers and everybody else, or the students to have to speak words that violate their own beliefs on something. And we saw that, of course, if you remember the Tanner Cross case where you had a teacher and he didn't feel comfortable having to tell a kid, that was that compelled speech issue. So we also have had some other good things in that direction besides these guidelines. So these schools still trying to do that in any way, shape, or form are just out of line.
All right, the big question here, Victoria, is will the other school boards take this cue and follow suit?
Oh, that is the question, and we are certainly doing everything we can with these parents, helping them have a voice to try to encourage the school boards to do the right thing. I think the Virginia Beach situation is a great sort of guidepost of how you should handle it. It's, maybe don't wait for the lawsuit next time. But we have on record at least 5 school districts that have flatly rejected the Youngkin provisions. They're mainly in the Northern Virginia area, saying like, no, we're going to keep this deception. We're going to keep these, whoever uses whatever bathroom and all that. Now, but we, and also I shouldn't say it's just Nova because Amherst, we don't think
and
of.
I think Richmond too.
Yeah, we don't think of like Amherst, which is more rural, as an area that's going to be so aggressively involved.
That one was surprising.
Yeah. So anyway, so it's not, don't assume, I would say everybody needs to know their own county. Don't assume just because you're in a rural area that your school district isn't trying to reject these. But we also do have some good examples. So we have Roanoke County and we have Spotsylvania and now Virginia Beach that are all moving forward and adopting the new guidelines. So it's a little bit of a mixed bag, and that's why I think parents need to know and need to be part of the pressuring their school boards to do the right thing.
We got news on a couple more that may have adopted. We're checking into that.
Yeah,
at the
Isle
time.
of Wight was one that might be heading in the right direction. That sounds like a possibility.
The situation is, though, that you still have a slew of school districts across the Commonwealth that have done nothing, that are just apparently taking this wait-and-see approach. And we're hearing from parents like the ones in Newport News that had this rally that are losing patience with the inaction. You know, they're just going to their school board meetings, hearing these endless discussions, and nothing happens to respond to their concerns. And like I said, that was especially frustrating to these parents in the Tidewater, Newport News region, because there's schools there that are either slow walking or like Suffolk that seem to be resisting. Some of their school officials have made statements opposing these policies.
Yeah, and I mean, I don't want to specifically pick on those, but a lot of these were pretty quick to pass the original Northam guidelines. It didn't take a lot of time for some school boards to immediately put bad guidelines in place, but it's taking an awful long time for them to move forward with good guidelines. I'm not picking on a specific district, but it's just there's a challenge there, and parents are obviously aware of that and wondering about that. So it was so powerful to see these passionate parents show up at our Speak Up Newport News rally and part of our Tidewater Speak Up team to come out, put their voices together on this rally. And I think we should just play a little clip from the local television, the news station that covered it.
Youngkin's proposed policies impacting LGBTQ students are in the spotlight again. Virginia Beach schools adopted a modified version last week. The Suffolk School Board delayed its vote last week, citing a need for more discussion. Well, tonight a rally hosted by a parental rights group advocating school districts to fully adopt the policies. News 3's Jay Green joins us in the studio. And Jay, you attended that rally tonight, but you're also hearing from other voices as well.
Kurt, the Family Foundation of Virginia held the rally outside a Newport News church tonight, saying these policies protect parents' power to be involved. But like you said, I also spoke with LGBTQ advocates. They say these policies have the potential to be harmful. A crowd of parents and educators gathers outside the World Outreach Worship Center in Newport News. The rally, hosted by the Family Foundation of Virginia. Among the speakers, parents and rally organizers urging school districts that haven't acted to adopt Governor Youngkin's model policies.
Make it clear that parents must be notified and given an opportunity to object before counseling regarding gender is given to our children.
Bottom line, it's time to stop leaving parents in the dark when sexual and gender identity experimentation are promoted by school officials to their kids at school.
One Newport News school board member also spoke at Monday's rally.
Parents are essential to the success of our children, to the success of public education, that without parents engaging and parents doing what they do, then we simply cannot have a successful school division.
All right, Victoria, did you happen to notice in this news clip the huge LGBTQ banner that was kind of just mysteriously there throughout the reporting? I thought that was interesting.
I really did think the news entity was very clear about where they stand by putting that rainbow up there. And also when they pitched the story from the anchor to the guy out in the field, it was like, but you're also hearing from other parents. Like there was nobody else there on the other side. But let me make sure that we are clear that this isn't the only side of this issue. And we know it's not the only side, but they just went out of their way, I would just say.
I wish they would go out of their way to seek our
We don't see that when it's the other way around. If the other side had a rally, they wouldn't be like, oh, and there are these other voices. Let me go ask the parents. Let's ask the Family Foundation. It doesn't happen that way, so we noticed those things. But overall, it was great coverage of this rally, and I think it's really important that we just encourage folks to keep speaking up like this and to have like 200 parents. Yeah. I think that was a pretty strong statement, and they were just challenging their school board members to move forward, to not get stuck and not delay and not, I mean, they've really taken their time with this.
Let me just say, as you mentioned, the school boards were in a rush for the most part. All right. This specifically came up. Parents talked about this at the rally, at the press conference, because in Newport News specifically, their school board, at first they rejected the Northam policies in response to parents.
Right.
Then they got pressure from the ACLU, LGBTQ, leftist
and
media.
A congressman that, if you remember, Bobby Scott was very involved in the pressure from the top.
Okay, within a matter of days. We're talking like 2 days, I think.
Magically, they could put in the bad guidelines.
Back
exactly.
To the Northam. So now the parents, like Rhonda, are showing up. We've been showing up for weeks, even months at this point. You don't seem to be in as much a rush to do something about it.
And, I mean, this is not in Tidewater area, but like where there are counties, not just cities, those guys have elections and they're stalling. There are counties that are stalling this conversation until after the election. And voters kind of want to know, where's my school board on this? If the school board happens to be one of the ones that are up for election, there's a lot of areas that people are going, is this political? Why we're stalling? Now, that might not be true of the cities in Tidewater, but that's reasonable. That's reasonable.
Definitely have a couple examples right off the top of my head where I know that is happening.
Yeah, so
right here in the Richmond area too.
All that to say, we're proud of these parents, and I think they did an outstanding job.
Yeah, Rhonda's message to the school board was, quote, demonstrate courage and protect kids by protecting their parents' rights to be involved. And that pretty much sums it up.
Yep.
Well, I wish we had time to play more clips from the parents at the press conference, but there was one that I wanted to highlight because I feel like this local attorney there in Newport News had a really important point, and nobody in the media covers it or talks about it, but it's one that I would like for us to address. Let's just play this comment from Veronica Williams, like I said, a well-respected attorney, business owner there in Newport News, and then I'd love to get your thoughts on it.
Specifically, under Virginia law, a licensed mental health care professional is at risk of losing his or her license to perform counseling and therefore their livelihood for unprofessional conduct if he or she counsels a child with gender dysphoria to even consider embracing his or her gender of birth. This means that when a child is referred to counseling, whether inside of the school system or outside of the school system, the child is not being referred to a licensed professional who is free to exercise independent professional judgment. To the contrary, the child is being referred to a professional who is operating under the risk and threat of losing his or her license and livelihood if he or she even suggests that the child consider embracing his or her gender of birth. What we don't want to see is a precious and extremely impressionable child who currently self-identifies as transgender make a decision that they will later regret to have irreversible gender transition surgery while still a minor, and without the parent being notified and giving consent to this counseling as a result of the pressures that are being brought to bear on the young minds and hearts from different directions and from adults in positions of authority who, from a practical perspective, have had their hands tied by statute.
Victoria, talk to us about what she's saying, the fact that there is this Virginia law that ties the hands of counselors interacting with kids, as she was explaining, and really the impact of that on children's well-being in the schools.
Yeah, it's very powerful for her to help people understand how laws fit together, how we have bad school policies that confuse children, but behind it, we also have a law that bans talk therapy, right? So just having a conversation with a child from a counselor to a kid, if they are confused around their gender, the counselor is allowed to encourage them to change their mindset and pretend that they are a different gender. They're allowed to encourage them towards transgenderism, but they are not allowed to try to help their thinking realign with their biological gender. And what this attorney is saying is we create confusion in the schools, and then the kids can only go to a counselor that can only point them in one direction. How dangerous is that? I don't think we've given enough airtime to how bad this law is, that kids can't get real help. They can't have an actual professional. Counselors, it's outcome-based counseling, meaning the child should be able to walk in and say, I'm struggling with confusion. And if they say, I don't want to be confused anymore, I'd like to realign my thinking with my gender, the counselor should be helping them do that. And that's illegal in Virginia.
So just to be clear, if the kid comes in and says, I want help, I have this confusion, this agony inside of me, but I actually want to live according to my God-given gender.
If that counselor helps them, they may lose their license.
So the counselors cannot help the kid if the kid comes in with that request. Is that what?
That is right. That is right. That is against the law. Somehow we have literally taken speech by a counselor and said you can only go this direction. You can only help someone this one way. There's no other area that we do that with counseling. There's no other single reason you would go into a counselor and say, I'm struggling with I don't know, anorexia, whatever, depression, whatever. And you would say, I would love to really kind of get this under squared away, get my thinking around this squared away. And the law would say, nope, can't help you. This is the only area we do that in. And these kids are left defenseless. They can't get the help they need.
And she was connecting that dot to this is why we must have parents involved, because you're not putting them down a neutral path.
Yes.
So the parents absolutely have to be involved.
Parents are parents, and I would say, this is a call to the church, youth pastors and those kind of folks who aren't professional counselors are the only ones that can actually help a child work through this, because we've put this clamp down on actual professional licensed counselors.
Yeah.
It's terrible.
Well, to kind of wrap up the outcome of what happened with this rally, because there were some events afterward. For one thing, there was a very dramatic, I guess that's the best way to put it, Newport News School Board meeting the very next night. So all these people came out for the school board meeting. The room was full with people speaking on both sides of this issue. They even had to go to an overflow room. In addition to the parental rights supporters, like the ones you just saw speaking at that rally, there were many LGBTQ activists, transgender individuals, teacher union representation, atheist groups, you name it. They were
all
there.
goes down in one school board meeting.
And there was, I will say, there was a lot of disturbing anger in the room on the left. I think it's fair to say that I do not think that anger was coming from the Christian moms and dads speaking, but there was a lot of anger on the other side. It's actually quite stunning how much anger there is. There's also heartbreaking situations that people dealing with transgender issues are describing that we should pay attention to. But overall, this pattern began to emerge, if you're paying attention to what's being said, that those that were opposing the Youngkin revisions, there seemed to be this pattern in the talking points that they were making aimed at marginalizing the moms and dads in the room that were supporting parental rights, aimed at painting them as these discriminatory people, number one, and number two, as religious extremists. Comment after comment was trying to paint this picture. But I was so proud of the parents that were there. They didn't let it faze them. They spoke up boldly. And I'm just going to show a clip here of an exchange that happened to just give you a little idea of what that school board meeting was like and the courage the parents had to show.
That's not the real world that we live in. The world that we live in is a world where some of the people in this audience would probably beat their kids, like somebody who spoke earlier, if they came out and they said that they were transgendered or LGBTQIA or a member of that community. I'd also like to just real quick say that the parent organization that's supporting the Protect the Kids Foundation looks a lot like a religious hate group. All of their whole website is dedicated to ensuring that they pass their religious policies.
All right. Well, not only do you basically have this you beat your kids accusation in this one comment, but in one fell swoop, he also accused, I think he was trying to accuse the Family Foundation of being a religious hate group.
Yeah, we've heard that before. Somehow that seems to make its way into lots of opposition. But I mean, the underlying thing there, then what he's truly saying is that the Youngkin model policies are somehow religious, which no, I mean,
policies.
We're not supporting anything. I mean, yes, some of us come at it from religious beliefs, but lots of people come at it from a very secular belief that just simply says, I care about my kid. It doesn't take religion to actually defend your child.
Yeah, well, the reality is there are multiple religious groups of all spectrums supporting these parental rights. And even if you aren't religious, I think we've seen polling that the majority of Virginians are in agreement on where parents should be able to be involved, that girls' sports should not be threatened.
Yeah, there are things that absolutely transcend a faith-based perspective. And I would say parents being informed absolutely transcends all religions.
Mm-hmm.
People want to know what's going on with their kid in school, regardless of where they come from a faith perspective. So it's kind of ridiculous for this guy to swoop everything into that.
I think people should understand when they go to these school board meetings that you do see this tactic of trying to raise this, really it's trying to raise a scare tactic of this specter of religious extremists trying to invade your schools. And really it's just a way to take people's eye off the ball of what's really happening, and that's the core issue of erosion of parental rights. So just don't get distracted by those tactics and keep your eye on the ball on what we're there for, to strengthen parental rights.
Well, over and over, we've seen that if you can lump something in as being religious, then it gets discarded, right? So that's a strategy. Like if we can claim something is religious, then the school board has to sweep it under the rug. They have to push it aside, because how dare we ever, move on something that religious people also happen to care about.
All right. Well, I will just say, I did do a little research into who this person was that was basically accusing a lot of people of beating their kids and calling the Family Foundation a hate group. And interestingly, he came across as if he was just an average dad. That's all. But when you looked into it, he's actually, as of 2022, I found a blog as of 2022, he was listed as a leader in an atheist organization and also held an office in something called Secular Humanists, a secular humanist group.
So he has a beef against religious entities, obviously. This is
neutral.
not average dad.
He also had done lobbying, I don't know, on something like 40 bills, including same-sex marriage and abortion rights, is how it was described. So like you said, this isn't your average dad.
This is an activist, and he should just be honest about that.
Well, if you're going to go after a pro-family group, then maybe you should acknowledge that you also are.
I mean, it's fair. He's a dad. If he's a dad, that's fine. But it's obvious that, people just need to know there's a little more behind that.
Yeah. Well, all right, let's go to the good side of the encouraging side of this, and that is the dad that got up next, the very next speaker. I love this guy. First of all, he's wearing this hoodie with a Protect Every Kid, just dead center in the middle of his Falcons sweatshirt, Atlanta Falcons.
Yes, of course.
Yeah, so that was just cool. But then he's just so authentic. He's not there. He's not scripted. I don't even know who he is, but I just love the passion that he had.
I don't honestly have anything prepared. I'm just here as a parent, as a father. A loving parent and father. I believe as a parent and father who has nurtured my children to the point to where they could enter a Newport News public school deserves a voice in their lives. Opposite of what this gentleman just said, I don't beat my children. I wouldn't approve if they were LGBTQ. However, I would not beat them because of it. I am a parent that would, in fact, seek counseling. One of my children are already in counseling. Why is it that I, as a parent, a loving father, should have to suffer because of the potential of some other parents?
Well, I love that he just at least countered this other guy. Like, no, I don't beat my kids. Like, because I mean, that is such a terrible thing to sort of put over the whole crowd. And so he kind of countered that and just said, look, that's ridiculous. But he also said he's going to be there for his kid, and, and he's going to defend them, and that his kids shouldn't have to suffer from these policies. And I think that's the part that doesn't get heard enough, is that, these policies are blocking parents from just being able to be a part of their children's lives and discuss these issues as they deem appropriate.
Yeah, it's like they're being punished
for,
as he said, the potential of other parents failing on their job.
Right.
Like he's being punished for that.
Yes.
But he also made a really good point about how the Newport News School District is not going to be the one that's there when his kids have surgery, when they get married. I thought that was well said.
Yeah, any school official that gets up there and makes it sound like they love your kid more than you love your kid, we just know that's not true. And so there's this idea like the school is the great protector and the parent is the great evil, and that is just not the case in 99% of the families that are in the school system. And so we need to stop pretending and allowing that charade to be sort of the narrative that happens in school board meetings.
And I've often heard it said you shouldn't use the exception to
create policy, right? Policy is intended to protect as many people as possible. Yes, occasionally you have to protect somebody that is in an oppressed situation, but I'm telling you, 99% of these parents are going to love on their kids. They're going to do the best by their kids as much as they possibly can, but unless the school blocks them from doing that.
Right. Well said. All right. Well, despite all those people speaking up for hours at that school board meeting, we still didn't see any action.
Right.
Now, I have heard word that they're trying to work on it. They're trying to come up with a solution. So let's give them the benefit of the doubt. But parents need to keep the pressure up. Right?
Absolutely.
Well, we did have one final news update that we wanted to share with you that's kind of related to all that we've been talking about, and that's that we received word from our sister family policy council in South Carolina, the Palmetto Family Council, that Eventbrite unpublished, or, another word for deplatforming their event. They were hosting this event that calls attention to the dangers of pushing kids prematurely down this path of gender transition and surgery, pediatric transition surgery and the dangers of that.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting, of course, that this event, which was slated to be early November, was going to feature our own Chloe Cole that we had. If you remember, folks, we had her in this podcast. We had her to a rally out in Virginia Beach because she is really a great voice for kids that have been harmed by transition. And so this event was supposed to feature her, and then the Palmetto family basically received a message from Eventbrite saying that it violated their policy on hateful, violent, and dangerous events. Now, I can't imagine how this event was going to be violent and hateful. This is one person's story they were going to feature.
It does kind of remind you of what happened at the Newport News School Board meeting, where you have this activist trying to paint a whole group of people as a religious hate group. It's kind of like this hate word is used as a short circuit way to shut down speech. It seems to be the tactic now.
Yeah, I think it's really concerning, especially when, and basically what they're saying is any detransitioner that tells their story is somehow hateful or bigoted or violent, in this case, if it violates their policy on violence. And we know that they're just telling how they've been harmed. So this is deeply concerning, but there is good news. And the good news is that our Attorney General, Jason Miyares, has signed on with 18 other attorneys general around the nation, and they are asking Eventbrite to clarify its policy. Because again, I feel like they just slap up, whatever they don't like falls under this policy somehow, and they decide not to host the event. So the Attorney General letter points out that Eventbrite ranks in the category of big tech. So this is a legal thing here, and considering it sold 84 million tickets within just 9-month period last year. So this is like a massive thing. This is not going after a gnat. This is trying to say you are a major player in this field, and have been a major player in this field with all sorts of events. So they're saying, look, tens of millions of consumers rely on Eventbrite. And so that's their way of distributing their event and getting their message out. And so that's why, as the letter points out, it's so concerning that Eventbrite has been, quote, routinely deplatforming events all over the world that espouse a view on gender different than its own, right? They're saying, you have this massive customer base, and you're literally saying, we don't agree with this, so we're not willing to allow these folks to have any perspective. So anyway, the letter goes on to say that rather than celebrating the marketplace of ideas and trust that the truth will prevail, Eventbrite appears poised to manipulate public opinion by silencing political dissidents. I'm tripping over my own words. But yeah, so it's a problem.
Yeah, I'm encouraged to see that strong language
Absolutely.
from all of these attorneys general.
And I think they point out a great point, which is the truth will prevail. And I honestly believe when you need to cancel other people's speech, you're worried that your message is not right.
The concern is, though, when you have enough power, that you can get away with that. And that's what's concerning about big tech, or when you have a lot of political power or the money. And that's why we've got to stop, we've got to keep pushing back against that so that we don't just wake up one day and find, well, now we're powerless. Our voices have been shut out. I mean, this does get back to also just sharing the gospel. I think it's not just, these social issues. When you have massive groups of people being shut down or stigmatized, it does, I think, lead back to our most important mission, which is sharing the grace of God, which we know that's the next thing that gets shut down.
Yeah,
so
this is an important preventative measure on one particular issue, but we don't know what are the future things that are going to be shut down by these kind of tech companies. If they view an issue differently than we do, or if they view faith, to your point,
right,
the gospel differently than we do, are they going to just start not allowing Christians to post events?
So with that said, I'm just going to go ahead and wrap up. Thank you for joining us for Speak Up Virginia. Remember to share our playlist, the Speak Up Virginia playlist on YouTube. And don't forget, if you're listening on our audio platforms like Apple and Spotify, to give us that 5-star review so we can get what's going on in Virginia out to more people. Thank you. Remember, we are stronger when we speak together.